Hello again. Now, schools around the country will have to do with a new crop of teachers soon. That's because there's an expected teacher exodus in the country. Studies show that half of the country's publicly employed teachers are aged above 50. This is going to lead to a wave of teacher retirements between now and 2030. Well, that's according to research that's been done by the Research on Socio-Economic Policy Group. Professor Nick Spaull is with them and joins us now to further unpack this situation. Good afternoon, Prof. Thank you very much for your time. It's a very interesting research that you've done that shows there is going to be a wave of retirements because of age. Teachers can retire from age 55 in the public sector, but there'll also be opportunities here for prospective teachers. What are the major concerns?
Sure, and thanks for having me, Dan. I would say the two or three major concerns here. The first one is, as you mentioned, 49% of public school teachers are aged 50 or higher and are going to retire in the next 10 years, which is a really unprecedented wave of retirement. The second one is whether or not the current policies that are in place are being proactive enough to deal with this. The reason why I say that is, although we are producing the right number of teachers at the moment, we aren't actually hiring enough of those teachers to maintain class sizes at their current levels. So we're starting to see class sizes rise because provinces are not hiring the teachers that universities are producing. And that's a really big problem. And it's one that's likely to get even worse as more and more teachers retire unless provinces start ramping up the number of teachers that they're going to hire.
Let's just focus on the numbers if you are able to break them down for us. What would be the ideal ratio? Is it still 30 pupils per teacher? And if that's still the case, what are the numbers looking like? How many more teachers do you think need to come into the system as the others are exiting due to retirement?
Sure. So we typically look at two things. One is something called a learner-educator ratio. So this is just the number of teachers per learner, or the number of learners per teacher. And that's risen from about 27 learners to one teacher in 2012, to about 30 learners to one teacher in 2021. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but you must remember that that's just what's on paper. In practice, class sizes in South Africa are on average in mid-40s, can even be as high as 50 or 60 in some of the more rural provinces. So we're starting to see class sizes increase quite dramatically. And this is a number of different studies are showing that. In terms of the number of teachers that need to be produced, this sort of depends on a number of different assumptions. If we just want to replace the teachers that we currently have, so in other words, the ones that are retiring, we need to go from adding about 25,000 teachers per year, which is what we currently produce, and we would need to increase that to about 32,000 teachers per year by 2030. But if we wanted to not only maintain the number of teachers, but also keep our class sizes and learner-educator ratios at their current level, we also need to take into account the fact that there would be additional learners that are coming into the system because of population increases and also because of increased survival to grade 12 because of lower dropout rates. And then the number of teachers that would need to be added would increase to 36,000. If we want to go back to learner-educator ratios from 2012, which was a much more favorable time, we would then need to go up to 42,000 teachers. So at a high level, we would basically need to increase teacher production very significantly, even just to take into account retiring teachers, and we're not currently replacing those teachers.
What is your study showing? Do we have the capacity to do that? Do our colleges and universities have that capacity?
That's a great question. So that is one of the ones that we looked into, is the number of teachers that the universities are producing. And this increased from about 9,000 teachers in 2010 to about 28,000 teachers in 2019. So it's a tripling of the number of teachers that the universities are producing. And this is in keeping with the Department of Higher Education and Training's trajectory, what they wanted to maintain in order to keep learner-educator ratios constant. But what we've seen is that over that same period, although there was a big increase in teacher production, because provinces aren't hiring those teachers, learner-educator ratios rose, class sizes also rose. And to put it at a high level, we used to, in the public sector, we used to hire about 75% of the teachers that the universities were producing. Around 2015, we were hiring about 75% of the teachers that the universities produced. But now, in 2021, we produced about 28,000 teachers, but only hired about 14,000 teachers. So we're only hiring 50% of the teachers that the universities are producing. And that's a big question. Why are provinces not hiring the teachers that the universities are producing, despite the fact that there's this big retirement wave and class sizes are increasing?
Yeah, we keep on hearing about that huge vacancy scenario that is playing out in basic education. By the way, between the two streams, primary schooling and high schools, which ones are likely to be more affected by this looming retirement exodus of teachers in the next few years?
So it's a good question to ask where this is likely to be concentrated. And while there are differences between primary and high school, with more older teachers in primary schools than in secondary schools, the biggest issue is actually in rural provinces. So provinces that like Limpopo and Mpumalanga, even the Free State, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, these provinces are going to experience the teacher retirement wave in a much more severe fashion than the more urban provinces like Gauteng, the Western Cape, and the urban parts of KwaZulu-Natal around Durban. And the reason for that is that they already struggle to get teachers to go to rural areas in those places. So as there's a retirement exodus and people leaving, when there's a retirement exodus in Gauteng, they won't struggle to fill those posts because teachers will come from other provinces to fill the posts in Gauteng. So it will create a double whammy in those more rural provinces, because not only will they have their own teachers that are retiring and need to be replaced, but many of the teachers that are in their provinces will also be leaving to go to the urban provinces to take up more desirable positions from the retiring teachers in those urban provinces. So it's less about high school versus primary school and more about urban versus rural.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the whole study, Prof. Your whole study. But my final question to you would be: do you delve into possible solutions? How this exodus of half of the state or public school teachers headed for retirement, how it could be addressed, besides increasing or boosting the production of teachers?
Sure. So this is a 3-year project. So we are still working on this in 2023 and 2024. One of the areas that's being explored is teacher internships and using schools as sites of teacher training. So not only training teachers at universities, but you might find that teachers that are studying part-time or studying via distance can actually be employed in schools and become socialized and skill or job shadow highly functional teachers in functional schools as a way to increase the caliber of teachers. And that is kind of the silver lining about this project, is that we find that the content knowledge levels of younger teachers are much higher than the content knowledge levels of the teachers that are leaving the system. Because many of the older teachers that are retiring and leaving the system were actually trained under apartheid and educated under apartheid, where the curriculum was deliberately disempowering. Whereas the new cohort of teachers, even though they're at the bottom of the university distribution, they're still much more knowledgeable than the retiring teachers. So in that sense, it's a very good thing that the younger teachers are taking the place of older teachers.